her 4-point program. She said in-service programs are worth it if they are school-based. And that's the challenge, that it's so easy for institutions like NCRT and others to pull teachers out of their schools, put them together in a workshop, and have great ideas during the workshop, and then go back to where you are, and go back with the feeling, yahan to kuch nahi ho sakta, kind of feeling. I think she's absolutely right. Professional development as an ongoing program has to be a school-based program. And teacher educators, or resource persons as they are now called in the new culture of human resources, they cannot afford the luxury of thinking that we will teach the teacher while we will never engage with children ourselves for more than a few hours. You know, somebody reminded us this morning, something that needs to be remembered in the evening as we depart, that a teacher's life is a very, very demanding, tiring life. A teacher is not teaching to affect, teaching to impress for a day or half a day like a teacher educator. A teacher works in a very exhausting routine. And that routine has its own routinizing effect on the psyche, on the body, on all aspects of it. Teachers need renewal, they need frequent renewal, they need recharging of their energies and batteries, while the school system is busy sucking the last drop of blood to utilize creative energies of the young. It burns out young people much too fast. When their experience is available, by then energies burn out. That's a sad reality of the teaching profession, especially in the primary grades, where life is most taxing and where our system has a blind spot. The Buddha, had he come to visit our primary schools in our part of the world, would have said, "You suffer from deep ignorance." Because that is where your nation, your community is either built or destroyed. And if your teacher is not happy, if your teacher is not full of energy every morning, if your teacher is not looking forward to having a nice creative day with children, then something is fundamentally problematic. And I think this question of how in-service programs, as we call them, or professional development programs to enhance quality, are taken up by people who are going to work with teachers, how they must have that awareness of the teacher's real life, so that they don't talk to teachers or teach teachers, but rather see how their own knowledge, expertise, or more recent knowledge that they might have can create a kind of an osmosis effect among teachers, so that the teachers then can take this forward. I have no doubt about it. It has to be a school-based process, as was pointed out this morning, and it has to be a sustained process. So the administration here has certainly a very important task to work out. If all the schools are to be dealt with, I think the Government of India terminology will be it will be the wrong one, which is to cover. If all the schools have to be covered, we used to say in NCRT, then how many workshops, how many years, and so on and so forth. That's the wrong way to do planning. Schools don't have to be covered. Schools have to be, this activity has to be sustained so that it becomes a permanent fixture of school life. And teachers begin to see professional development opportunities or days or work with these resource people, as they are called, as friends with whom it's nice to work for some time, nice to meet them again. And certainly technology has a very important role there. But it has to be an enabling role. Our country right now is stuffed with techno-romantics who are using technology sometimes to suggest as if the teacher is going to be replaced, which is terrible. I think the greatest marketeers of technology wouldn't like to agree that that's how it should be done. But that's how the ethos has got created. So I feel very, very concerned about the use of money for this sector. There's a great potential there, but certainly it has to be done without too much excitement. The trouble with technology is the same that children have with Chinese toys. They get too excited because they do so many things. Lights come from here, sounds come from there, and then the child is lost. The child's desire to play is finished. And that's the trouble with some of these new gadgets. So we have to remember the longer story of education. Education is not a new story. It's one of the oldest stories of humankind. And so we have to remember the lessons which we learned, sir, from your remarks, that engagement with children in terms of the heritage of learning and heritage of certain methodologies, techniques, that engagement is very necessary. My last point, pardon me again for a hobby horse, which I pursue wherever I can. The heritage crafts of every community in South Asia are some of the greatest neglected resources of learning that we have. And no less a lawyer, an advocate like Mahatma Gandhi, who was a professional lawyer, spoke for them but failed to persuade the nation to take crafts more seriously. They are not to be learned just for the sake of becoming capable of self-employment. No, that's not the purpose, even though many Gandhians like to talk about them like that. They have a deeper aesthetic value, they have a deeper psychological value, they have an ethos building and a self-regenerating capacity in all parts of the world, but certainly in our part of the world, where they have had a very deep place in culture, in civilization, in economy, and so on. And Tibetan arts and crafts are the world over famous for their depth, for their engagement with the larger questions of life. I think a craft corner, a craft lab, in training of teachers in these heritage crafts, involvement of professional master craftsmen and women in residence in schools, creation of opportunities when they can be resident craftspeople in schools for a few months, so that children approach them, children work with them. When learning occurs in the context of a craft, it's a very, very different kind of experience. And that experience it certainly adds the W to that whole holistic point that Arun was making this morning. It's a very holistic kind of learning that takes place. And again, I know where Gandhiji failed. Very few of us can succeed in making this age and the kinds of times we are living in, when technology is replacing all forms of manual work, unfortunately, to make a plea for heritage crafts of various kinds, including the arts with which they are integrally related, in either music, in handswork, in art, in visual forms, in so many other forms, is a very difficult exercise, this pleading. And I hope that Tibetan administration will take up this agenda, work out the finances, look for institutions to collaborate with. There are so many in our country and around South Asia. And I'm sure the Tibetan community itself has many very good institutions working in this area. The only question is, how do we deploy their expertise and their strengths in schools at all levels, from primary level upwards? That deployment, that connection is what is important. Otherwise, the resources are there. They are all over the place. Each time I come to Dharamshala, I notice those resources. Just walking down a street, you can see people in their own shops being, engaged in that work, whether it's to do with, weaving, it's to do with spinning, various other things are there. These people are teachers. These people are people who have maintained a certain tradition with great sense of self-motivation and a sense of beauty and a sense of rigor. And when children work with them, remarkable things happen. So it's really a question of how do we deploy community resources as well as expert resources to create a corner, even if it's not part of CBSE or whosoever is the custodian of the official curriculum. I think we'll have many opportunities tomorrow to come back to that issue of examination and how best we can negotiate it without losing all of our freedom and all of our right to freedom, which is ultimately the goal of all this reform and strengthening of education in the context, which is a very, very, I should say, challenging human historical context in which our meeting has been held today. So thank you very much for this session. These afternoon sessions have been